Alright, we are going to go for a tour, a data tour. There is a human who is on a similar grounds as me in regards to belief, in regards to the pandemic and the subjects that are involved in the pandemic. This human, like me, was involved before the pandemic in discussing science of disease genesis and mitigation. This human happens to be my biological father officially. These are the most important parts of the COVID, of course. That's what the title says. So originally, when the COVID pandemic was announced and we were seeing all of these case numbers just exponentially growing, was it spreading? So when it was all happening, when the case numbers were growing, you see it in South Korea. In South Korea, while their case numbers were growing, the amount of positive to negative cases was decreasing. So isn't that interesting? Technically, whatever body of biology they are testing, it is getting less infected with this COVID-19 as the pandemic is starting. We're testing South Korean humans while the case numbers were soaring and while everyone said, okay, we are going into lockdown now. The amount of positive cases to negative cases was actually lowering in South Korea. Why just South Korea? Don't know. But they went into lockdown. Pretty sure this is everywhere in the northern hemisphere at the time. I don't know. See, look at America. They didn't have many positive results until they started testing a lot. Because see how many positive results were accumulated following the black cursor here. While all those positive results were just skyrocketing, look at the dates, 4th of March to the end of March, 3rd of March until halfway through March. The positive to negative was lowering and then it was growing. Okay. That's awkward, but not really. So the reason Gregory's added this in one of his 5 articles on this subject, 5 or 6, is because when America was saying, hey, let's go into lockdown, there's case numbers growing, the positive to negative ratio was actually lowering, i.e. the American humans that we were testing with PCR becoming less infected or becoming less positive on the result. Theoretically, if we think that the PCR is measuring the virus, theoretically the virus is becoming less prevalent in the USA population, it was becoming less prevalent whilst they went into lockdown. And then when they went into lockdown, it started becoming more prevalent. I don't think that's how that overall story plays out. But I think that's the end of this article, basically. Italy. And we're going to see about Italy's death rates. So they weren't really growing. What's with the high fatality ratio? Let's skip that. That means it's just basically he's saying what happened was the world looked at how many COVID-19 cases had been detected and looked at how many COVID-19 deaths had been attributed and looked at how many people were in the world and assumed that if you had COVID-19 you were detected. They'd assume that if you were able to pass positive on the PCR test, perhaps whilst you had a cough, then you were actually detected by the authorities. You were recognised and you were added to the list of people who had COVID. That's bizarre. At the start, when these high fatality ratios were being put out, not everyone was able to get tested. Obviously not everyone can get tested instantly. We don't have that kind of capability yet. The real fatality ratio and what it means, no one actually knows the real fatality ratio. But obviously the best theory, the biggest dude, Gregory will say, the biggest dude, John Ioannidis, one of at least in medical research, the most cited, big statistics, he said that the death rate is real small, and then they said what the F, and then he said actually it's smaller. Published in the WHO. Anyway, comparing 2020, so overall 2020 on the whole world, or the countries we did get data for, it turned out to be actually slightly better than average for the last 10 to 20 years. Some countries we had 10 years, some countries we had 21. Just quickly brush to look, South Korea they broke a record for all their ages in mortality. South Korea and Taiwan. I'll just cut that short for you. How many years of review were for these countries? So Luxembourg, we had 21 years that we could see for this from the human mortality database, which the link is in here. Look, let's go a bit slow tonight. There. See, so this one ranked 11. Korea ranked 11 out of 11, so Korea had its best year in all the years review that were available. Norway had the best year review in all the years available. 21, that is. Some countries had the worst year. I'm sorry, I was looking at 85 years. Anyway, some countries had the worst year. Look, I think Bulgaria, England and Wales, Italy, 10 years the worst in. Look, you can pause it here and have a look at that. Boom. Boom. Whatever. Let's go to the next one. I think you get the picture. But there's some special graphs that I want to show you from extrapolated from these data. Looking at comparing the weeks to see when the mortality started spiking in these countries like Italy. First, let's look at comparing the death rates of previous years continued. This is just going to drive home the same thing that we were just looking at. Okay, some countries had an issue, but not really a big issue. I don't remember what was so bad in 2004, what virus that was, but it was worse than COVID in Austria for the old people. But still, these countries, they had record years for their children. Okay, not record, but pretty good. Well, actually, they're not specifically children. They're not children. The children had a record year in Belgium. Bulgaria, the old people, not good. Why they actually went into lockdown? What do you expect if there was no virus at all? If they just simply went through a major lockdown drill and it was like a mistake or something that a big project that the aliens were running, you're going to expect many people will die. It will probably be the 15, 64-year-olds. You're going to expect many children will not die. The children mortality rate will lower because they won't be playing so much. They won't be able to run around freely. Looks perfect for my best guess theory that there is actually no disease-causing microbe anywhere, but that's a different story. This one here, there's no new coronavirus. There's no new thing coming. That's my best guess. And it's not illegal to have that or to share it. If you put these people through lockdown, yeah. Some people maybe they didn't have such a bad lockdown. Anyway, Switzerland, their children didn't have a record-breaking year, but there was only 1 year in the last 20 that was actually worse for child mortality in Switzerland, and it was not really worse. Anyway, let's look at the special graphs that I was talking about, which, I don't think they come with the links because they're actually from a private conversation, or they were in the development, they were in the making. But it shows some stuff. Let me just get some privacy. Anyway, it doesn't matter because from what I told you, it's just as valid if I just tell you what happened in the weeks where like places like Italy and Bulgaria and Spain had a mortality spike in 2020 when the coronavirus was going rampant. It was not before. It was not during the time when the government was thinking maybe we should lock down. The mortality rate was actually record for the old people before it was a record, or equally as there were no years that were better in mortality for the old people in 2020 until you can follow the weeks until they go into lockdown. Then it starts happening and it actually gets really high. Maybe it's just coincidence that the virus didn't make its impact on our data, make any extraordinary curves, didn't like make any extra numbers in mortality until we decided that it's time to lock down in these countries. in the countries that had a really harsh lockdown, a lot of people died. In Italy, there's probably a lot of old people. I don't know. I don't know like all that, but I don't know what to say. I mean.